Welcome everyone at the first Pages ECN webinar of this year. Pages ECN is an early career network for the members of Pages and offers to early career researchers opportunities to network, share information with the ECR community and to improve personal skills through our blog, our writing club, annual workshops and our webinars on various topics. The webinar of today has the title, How to Successfully Apply for Academic Jobs in Science. And we found Professor Timothy Brollower able to present his views on this important topic. Tim Brollower is a professor at the Department of Geosciences at Penn State University. His expertise includes micropaleontology, marine geology, and paleoceanography. And he currently researches the impact of climate change on oceanic plankton. For more than 20 years, Professor Brollower has been in functions where he was involved in or actively hiring young researchers for temporary and permanent positions. He is also involved in teaching, and in 2008 he developed the course Preparing for an Active Career in the Geosciences. Today, Professor Brollower will present to us a summary from his course. The presentation will last around 45 minutes, and afterwards there will be time to ask questions. You can ask questions by typing in your question in the Q&A chat window. And afterwards, Professor Brollower will be happy to answer all these questions. So this webinar will be recorded and afterwards put on our YouTube channel. And now I'd like to give the word to Tim Brollower.
Thanks, Nick. I'm happy to have everybody here today and to share a little bit of knowledge about applying for an academic career in the geosciences. And at the very outset, I'm going to keep stressing that this is an international presentation, but this is a very national focus. So I know the U.S. job market very well. I've been involved in the U.S. job market since I was applying for faculty jobs 35 years ago. So I've seen how the academic job market has evolved. And I've also been involved in hiring faculty, as Nick said. I've hired a lot of faculty at 2 different institutions. So I've seen how the job search has played out, and I understand the U.S. job market really well. I don't pretend at all to understand the job market in other countries, so I want to make that really clear. I do know the UK system a little bit. I know how different it is from the US. So in the US, you'll get a very good view of how to apply for a US academic job and do so effectively. That's my goal today. So as Nick said, I've been involved in career workshops, academic career workshops for 15 years now. The whole academic preparedness enterprise was launched by Heather McDonald and Robin Dunbar here in the US, and they taught summer workshops focused on how to effectively apply for an academic career starting in the early 2000s. And I myself hosted one of these in 2005 at Penn State. And that's what got me interested in this whole topic and teaching our graduate students, which I've done since 2008 with Professor Kate Freeman at Penn State. We teach this course every other year for a whole semester, but I'm going to condense what we do in a whole semester down to 45 minutes and hopefully give you the best hits. And the reason why I'm interested in this is because when I applied for my own first job back in 1986, I was totally unprepared to apply for an academic position. I can remember taking my slides to a slide maker, which is what we did back then. We didn't have PowerPoint. We made slides that we showed in a carousel. I took them in the day before. I ran to the slide maker on the way to the airport, picked them up, threw them in the carousel, and off I went. I had no clue what I was going to get asked at my interview, no clue how to answer questions about my interests. I was very, very poorly prepared. But now the situation is, with the way our field has evolved, everybody's getting more prepared. So we're all taking this a lot more seriously now. And I think what that's done is raise the bar in terms of how well you need to do in terms of the materials you present and the campus interview. So I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about the job outlook, and this is in the US. The academic job situation should be very good because there are a lot of people, baby boomers my age, who are beginning to retire. And in my department, I'd say 30 to 40% of the faculty are in, the general baby boomer age range, and we will be retiring in the next 10 years, starting now and into the next 10 years. So there should be a lot of jobs opening up. Of course, as everybody knows, the bad news is the pandemic is slowing down hiring significantly, and there's not like a global or a national hiring freeze. It depends from institution to institution, but most universities are not hiring right now, and the outlook is not too good for this year. As you all know, the semester was canceled, went online this semester. Summer school will be online. In the fall, I expect maybe some small schools to open and try to practice a social distancing, but I'm not sure about the large schools where we have large lecture halls and dormitories and recreation facilities and football games and parties and all that sort of thing. It's going to be very hard for us to have a campus taught online. I mean, face to face this fall. I think this fall will likely be online in many large schools. And what that means is a significant amount of revenue, because universities can't charge what they normally do for students who are online. They lose revenue from the facilities, the dormitories. They lose revenue from recreation facilities. They lose a lot of revenue from sports. And so I view the next semester is going to be tough for universities, and the spring, who knows? But what I've been saying to people is hopefully by this time next year, everything will be beginning to recover. So it's going to be hard for the next 12 months, but by that time, I think things will be recovering, and hopefully then we see hiring pick up just because the demand will be there for professors. So my message to everybody applying for an academic job now is to be strategic and flexible. So if you see a job in a location you wouldn't normally apply for, I would apply for it. If you see a job that isn't exactly what you want in terms of the institution or the research area or the type of student that you would want to be at, I would apply for it. I'd be a little bit more open-minded, just because I think it's going to be tougher to secure positions just for a short period of time. But stay positive and hopeful. Okay, so like I said, my presentation will be very US-centric. And in the US, we have 4 different types of academic settings. We have what are known as the R1 universities. These are both public schools, state-funded, and private schools, privately owned, with large research programs. So we're talking about a Penn State, we're talking about Michigan, or Wisconsin. We're also talking about a Harvard or a Duke or a Stanford or a Vanderbilt. These are sorts of programs that have master's and PhD programs. They have a large graduate population as well as a large undergraduate population, large research labs, infrastructure, etc. Then we have what's called the liberal arts universities or colleges. These are private. They are characterized by very fine teaching, very, very dedicated students who want exceptional teaching and classroom experiences, and they are generally very expensive. These are schools like Williams College or Carleton College or Wellesley College or Amherst College. These are all very fine institutions. They tend to be very expensive. So when we talk about the Research One universities, actually I'll get to the tuition in a minute, but the liberal arts schools can cost up to $70,000 a year. $70,000 a year. That is tuition and room and board. So they're very expensive. Then we have what are known as the primarily undergraduate institutions, or the PUIs. These are public state schools. They have larger teaching loads. They are undergraduate, very few graduate programs. So these are places like Cal State Chico or Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania, Kutztown in Pennsylvania. They're very good schools, but they just don't have the graduate population. So if you go to one of these places, you'll have a higher teaching load, more emphasis on teaching, less emphasis on research. And then finally are the community colleges. These are 2-year programs. They're very large, and they serve large numbers of people. In general, if you go to a community college, you go for 2 years, and then you can transfer from the community college to one of the other schools. And in some states, you automatically gain entry to a PUI or another state school. So it's often a very good option for students who don't know exactly what they want to do because they're inexpensive and they're close to home. Students can live at home and really get going and get their feet. These schools are going to grow, okay? And especially with the pandemic, the cost of a community college is substantially less. So students will, I'm guessing, go from some of these other settings into the community college for the next few months, and then lay low until the pandemic dissipates a little bit, and then go back. And then, of course, the other type of schools are schools that are 100% online, which just offer online courses. And again, these are less expensive and should grow for the next year or so. Okay. In terms of what this means for you, these settings are very diverse in what they require of you in terms of teaching loads, in terms of what they expect in terms of research, in terms of promotion, and they will actually look at your application quite differently. Okay, so if you're going to a community college, they can look for different things in your application than if you're applying for an R1 program. So, but I wanted to get across to everybody here, because this might be different in other countries. In the US, our state funding is very low. So we don't get a lot of money from our states, and I'm talking about the publics. And our private schools have very high tuition. So, but regardless of where you are, public or private, your university is driven by tuition. That's where the money comes from. Okay, and it's often a misconception among our graduate population, because they think the research dollars that we bring in pays our bills. That's not the case in almost any geoscience department, because we're not bringing enough money to pay for salaries, technicians, lab facilities, instrumentation, etc. It's the tuition dollars that subsidize all of that. So what's happened in the US is state funding has gone down, our tuition has gone up, and as tuition has gone up to very high levels, and I just wanted to tell you that in my state university, which is a government-funded university, our tuition for students who are in-state, just the tuition is about $17,000 a year. And that would mean that the cost, including room and board and the tuition, would be about $30,000 a year per student. And then the out-of-state students, folks who come to Penn State from New York or New Jersey, they will spend $34,000 for tuition, and then probably another 15 or 16 on room and board. They're spending $50,000 to go to a state school. So this is a really high cost for students to go to college compared with other countries. And that is why teaching is taken very seriously, as it is everywhere, I know that. But in the US, there's a lot of emphasis, there's an increasing emphasis on teaching, just because people are paying that much money, they want a really good product. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the parts of the academic portfolio that you'll be submitting with your application to your university. We'll talk about the cover letter briefly later and the CV briefly later. We're going to talk quite a bit about the teaching statement of teaching interests. This is it's a big part of your application, as like I've said, teaching is so significant. The statement of research interests, we'll talk briefly about that. And then this final piece called the diversity statement. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so I just wanted to convey to you that when we talk about your teaching statement, you must be aware of, not necessarily have practiced in your own teaching, but be aware of this change in pedagogy to active learning and engagement. Okay, these are really critical. And this has all changed over the last 15 years as the research has gotten better, and we've understood how students learn. We now understand that the days of clicking PowerPoint slides are over, and that if you want to be effective, you need to have an active classroom. Okay, so what we've understood is that everybody learns in different ways. Some students are active, some are visual, some are sensory, some are sequential, others are reflective, they're verbal, they're intuitive, or they're global. They're not going to spend time on this slide, but I think everybody knows that generally in earth sciences, we're all pretty active and visual and as learners, but that's not totally the case, but we tend to be very, very visual. And I know that if I go to a classroom, that's not going to be the case for many of my students. Many of my students will be verbal or reflective. And so I need to incorporate in my teaching strategies that will reach students regardless of how they learn. So that requires a very active style that will enable people to learn in different ways in your courses. So to reach all the learning styles, you need to use a variety of strategies. You need to use demonstrations. You generally want to give students data before you talk about theory, and to show them data before you talk about the theory. You need to have students work in teams, and we're talking quite a bit about that today, because teamwork is known to be very effective for active and engage, especially for engagement. You need to include activities that allow students to reflect on the new information they gather in this process that we call metacognition. Metacognition is when students actively tell you about how they learn, and it helps them cement what they've understood in their brain. And then, like I've said before, you have to avoid what we call the sage on the stage, the PowerPoint monologues that go on for 45 minutes with slide after slide after slide. And you all probably appreciate how students that disengage when you use that sort of a strategy. And I've seen it in my own teaching. I've taught marine geology for many years, and I could see after about 15, 20 minutes, you see the students start disappearing. You can see their brains just go elsewhere. They're not paying attention. They're not writing as much, and you can see the phones come out. You can see the computers open up. You can see just a total disengagement. So this is known now not to work. Okay, so what we try to do is we try to develop activities that are what we call scaffolded according to Bloom's taxonomy. And what Bloom's taxonomy does is it shows you the progression from the bottom of the pyramid, where you have some activities that provide knowledge, okay, so facts, and then on top of that you incorporate comprehension, and then on top of that you have them apply what they've learned. Then you involve analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So you have this sequential thought process, which goes from acquiring data or acquiring knowledge to analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating what they've learned. And I think this is very effective. So as you develop your activities, you need to be thinking about this Bloom's taxonomy. It's really critical. And like I've said before, I'll start a class with like a 10 or 15-minute lecture where I'll give people the essence of what they need to know, and then I'll have them do something for 10 or 15 minutes. Then I'll talk for another 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'll have them do something else, and then I'll bring it back to another short lecture. So little mini lectures interspersed with activities. And one technique that I found to be very effective is what we call just-in-time teaching. In just-in-time teaching, you give them something to read before they come to class, and then you start asking them questions at the beginning of the class as to how well they've understood that. And you can do that with clickers. We use those in large classes at Penn State, but you can also do that without. You can just say, okay, you needed to have read this, and ask questions around the room. What did you understand by that? What did you understand by that? And it puts some pressure on the students to have paid attention, to come to class with some knowledge, and be ready to use that in applications. Predictions using demonstrations are very effective. You can run a demonstration, you can show some data, and you can say to them, for example, what do you think the results are going to be of this? And wait for them to reply, and go from there. A lot of the time, what we're doing now is using what we call blended learning, or the flipped classroom, where students actually have to have studied the material before they come to class. And in the class, you have them do activities. So, for example, I teach a class where the class runs once a week for 75 minutes on a Thursday. The module opens on Monday, and they have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to study the material. They take a quiz on Wednesday night about the material, and then they come to class, and they basically do a lab with me on Thursday, where they get to apply what they've learned in the online materials to the classroom setting, in the classroom setting, and they work in groups or teams. And this is a very effective strategy for increasing engagement and increasing learning. So engaged pedagogy, the research shows that well-constructed collaborative learning exercises results in greater learning than independent activities. Students working in groups is a very effective way of having them learn and teach others. And one process that I use in many of my classes is called a jigsaw. And in a jigsaw, you divide students into teams, and each team will research a topic. So for example, I teach about hydrothermal vents. And when I talk about hydrothermal vents, I'll have a team on the biology, I'll have a team on the chemistry of the solutions, and I'll have a team research the mineralogy of the chimney structures. And so then each team gets together, they have about 20 minutes to read about those areas, and then they teach each other. So they talk about it and make sure they all understand it for 10 or 15 minutes. So we've gone about half an hour, and then what the students do is they disperse. So you have a biologist, a mineralogist, and a chemist teach each other about the other areas. So the biologist will teach the other two about the biology, the chemist about the chemistry, and the mineralogist about the mineralogy. And that way they teach each other. And the understanding philosophy here is you have to understand something in order to teach it. And it's very effective. And students like it because they get used to their teams and they get used to their groups. And they're, instead of sitting and passively trying to retain the material, they have to actively use it, and they learn so much better. The other thing you can do is to have competitions. Each team will research a topic, and then they compete for explaining it and earn credit for that. So that's another way of having what we call cooperative learning. The geosciences are really suited for active learning, just because we have so much large data, and we have so many good applications like the GeoMap app and Google Earth, where you can actually have students look at data sets and solve problems from those data sets. Our students tend to be very good with technology, and we also have things like systems thinking and complexity, which also lend themselves to engaged learning. So these are things that, and 3D and 4D thinking that allow students to be engaged through these active and engaged processes. So I think it's really critical that in your job application, you must be aware of these active and engaged philosophies, and you need to show that you're aware of them. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have performed them or used them, because many of you haven't had the opportunity to do that. But you should be at least aware of them, and you need to say this in what we call the teaching statement. Okay, so what is this teaching statement? It's less than 2 pages. Okay, and when I mean 2 pages, I generally mean 12-point font, probably single space, nicely laid out on the page. And what you have to do in your teaching statement is show a passion for teaching, even though many of you haven't had the opportunity to teach that much. If you have taught, you can tell the audience of your statement what you've loved about doing that and what you learned from that, and how you have used active and engaged pedagogy in your teaching. If you haven't had the opportunity, what you need to do is reflect on the best teachers you've had and what you've taken away from them and what you will take to their students. So like I said, you don't have to have a lot of experience or really even any experience to write one of these, but what you need to convey is a passion for teaching and enthusiasm. Okay. In the statements, you start out by talking about what your philosophy is, how you engage students of all different learning backgrounds and diversity. And also you need to talk about what you would teach at that college or university, and from a general education or a lower level for large student groups to the higher level majors in the geological sciences or oceanography, and then above that to graduate students, if that school has graduate students. All of the materials need to be really well laid out, logically thought, and well written. Okay, so it's very clear that the faculty will spend a lot of time reading these materials. You need to avoid poor grammar and spelling mistakes. I will work on them and have other people read them and critique them. They're very, very, very important in the application process. So there are plenty of online examples. Generally, don't tend to be geoscience statements, but here are just a couple of examples. And you can go online and Google teaching statement job application, or you could try teaching statement job application geoscience and what comes up. This will give you an example of how some people go about writing these things. It's with the diversity statement, it's the hardest thing to write, okay? Because many of you have not had teaching experience, and even if you have, it's really hard to express what it is you like about it and how you will go about it. It's much easier to write this research statement because this is what most of you have been doing for the last number of years. Okay, so that's the teaching statement. It's very critical no matter where you're applying. Now there's the research statement. The research statement should showcase your research, what you've carried out now to this point in the first part of the statement. Again, 2 pages, maybe a little bit more is allowable for the research statement, but not a lot. And then the second part of the statement must present a vision for the future. Where will you be in 5 to 10 years from now? You've got to present that as to how you will fit that research initiative or those initiatives into that particular institution, and how you will blend it with faculty there, how students will fit in, and you need to show how you'll fund that type of research. So this is a lot easier to write because you've already done the previous research part. You need to describe that. You need to cite your publications, but then you need to move beyond that and present where you will be in the future. And it's often really good if you make that a statement that fits the university. Like, I want to be at the University of Minnesota because I'm really interested in working on lakes, or I want to be at University of Delaware because I'm really interested in coastal systems. Something that fits. Obviously, you don't have to be a coastal person to go to Delaware or a lake person to go to Minnesota, but if you think of something that fits that school well, it's definitely a good idea to mention it in your research statement. Okay, so that's the research statement. Now we come to the diversity statement, and this is something that we've started requiring of faculty applicants in the last 5 years or so. And this is because the geosciences tend to be not very diverse. They tend to be generally male. We tend to be generally white. In the United States, our student body is increasingly diverse. Now, we're all doing better. All of our departments are doing better at hiring female faculty members. We've done a really good job of that in general. We're not where we need to be, but we've been much more successful over the last 15 to 20 years. But we're also recognizing that our students are increasingly diverse in terms of ethnic background in the US. And so we have all made a major effort to make our faculties more diverse, but we're not doing a particularly good job of that in the geosciences as in other physical sciences. We don't have many Hispanic faculty, and we have very few African American faculty. So we need to be doing a better job, and because of this, we need faculty colleagues who we hire to be aware of this diversity and to state how they accommodate their teaching and research goals to incorporate diversity and encourage diversity in their classroom and in their labs. So this is a difficult thing to write. It's difficult for anybody to write this. And there are plenty of examples. Again, it's something that you'll generally, if you come to campus for a visit, you'll likely get asked about diversity. It's something that people are taking very seriously, and that's why we require it in our application materials. So that's the diversity statement. Now I'm going to move on to the CV and the cover letter. All of you have probably done a CV. I like the CV to be very clean looking and well laid out. All of these materials should generally be submitted with as PDFs, not as Word documents, because Word documents can translate funny from a PC to a Mac, but PDFs obviously don't have that issue. So generally submit them as PDFs. The CV needs to be really nicely laid out with your name and your contact details, your your educational record, your employment record, and then your publications. I suggest for the CV that if you have publications, manuscripts in press, and papers that are published, you don't generally need to include abstracts in your CV. You can include abstracts if you don't have that many publications, but in general, I think faculty are really looking for publications when they make hiring decisions. Okay, and then finally the cover letter. And the mistake many people make with the cover letter is they write 5-page cover letters, and that is not a good idea. I always tell people the cover needs to be less than a page, needs to be on a single page, and it needs to showcase the rest of the application, your teaching statement, your research statement, your diversity statement. It needs to show that department why you were well suited for that position, but refer to the rest of your application. So you need to refer to your teaching statement, your research statement, and your diversity statement from your cover letter, and summarize why you fit in well with that department, because it's the fit that is what most people are going to consider when they make hiring decisions. Okay, so that's the application, and now what I want to move on to is the selection process. What will generally happen when these applications come in is right at the deadline. I always say to people, get your materials in before the deadline, okay, at the latest at the deadline, because once the deadline passes, your materials won't be taken as seriously. Sometimes people continue to look at these materials, but in general, we get so many applications that we're not going to keep looking at the materials when they come in late. What we'll do is we'll start screening the materials, and what we'll have is this process we call the down select, where we look at the materials and we decide which ones we're going to ask for letters from your letters of recommendation that we've requested you include in your application. And based on that, many departments now are doing Skype and Zoom interviews, and this will be increasingly common with the pandemic, because we're not traveling as much, and you know, so much is going on over the internet. We're going to probably have Skype and Zoom interviews, and those will then generally be used to select the candidates that come for campus interview. Normally at Penn State, we don't do Skype or Zoom interviews, but many schools are now using this. They'll down select, and then they'll say from 50 applicants, they'll select 10 for the Zoom interviews. They'll interview those people with the same questions, and then they'll select 2 to 3, maybe 4 students to come to campus for the campus interview. At Penn State, we usually will accept 3 to 5 students for a campus interview, and we bring them in, and that's what I was going to talk about next. So in the US, the campus interview is very different from what I know about the UK. The US campus interview lasts 1 to 2 days, and that will involve meetings with faculty, student groups, administrators. And I just wanted to stress to you that this can be exhausting. Okay, you need to prepare for this part. You'll be going from one meeting to another. This faculty member, that faculty member, this student group, that student group, the dean, the department chair, and you'll be doing all of this mixed in with your tour of the campus and the labs and presentations, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you really need to prepare for the campus visit. And one thing that will help you do that is the department's website. So you need to know who you'll be meeting with. And it's really good to know a little bit about what what these people are working on and what they teach and stuff like that, just because the decision is largely about fit, but it's also about what you will be like as a faculty colleague. And so if you go in and you haven't read anything that anybody's written, you don't know what people work on, you're not going to come across nearly so well as a colleague as someone who's done their research and knows what people are working on and thinks a little bit about how they could collaborate with those people as they go around meeting from person to person. So I think it's really important to do your research and know, okay, so-and-so is a seismologist, so-and-so is a microbiologist. Be really interesting. I'm a geochemist. I'm really interested in how my program fits with the microbiology program. And so you can talk a little bit about collaboration, because that's really, really important in the decision, along with fit and how what your vision for the future is. Okay, so now I want to talk about the academic job talk. This is the most important part of your interview. Okay, this is where decisions are made actively. So, the rest of the interview, people form impressions about what you'd be like as a colleague, but the job talk is where decisions begin to be made. And you have to do a good job at the job talk. A poor job talk will not land you a faculty position. You have got to excel here, and you have to aim it right. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about this. You need to show that your research is exciting and relevant. You need to show that you're a good teacher, and you need to have a really strong vision for the future as to where you're going. And all of this needs to come across in your job talk. So I always say, spend a lot of time preparing for your job talk. Okay, you need to know what is expected of you. You need to know who is attending your talk. You need to tell them what problem you've worked on and why anybody would work. Who cares about this problem? Why is it important? And why what you've done is significant, and how you've advanced knowledge in that area from one stage to another through your own research. Okay, so how your work has made progress on that problem is really important to know what your target audience is. So I always tell people, make sure that that's communicated to you. Okay, make sure it's communicated to you that you're giving a talk and it needs to be aimed at level X, because people can come in and if they don't know that, they can aim the talk too low or too high, and they miss the target audience, and that's not a good way to leave a good impression with your job talk. So, for example, at Penn State, I convey to people that we would like you to aim your talk at a general graduate student audience. So graduate level, that would be very different from if you're told to give a talk to an undergraduate student or to the general population. So you need to know what your target audience is. Okay. The second thing you need to know is that what the time is. And overall, generally, we expect a job talk that's 45 to 50 minutes maximum. Okay, and maximum is underlined because we will generally follow that up with a Q&A session, question and answer session. So we need to leave time for that so that the whole thing wraps up in about an hour, because this is an hour-long slot. And at the end of the hour, people will start leaving for classes, or if it's in the afternoon, to go home. Pick up children, go to a sports game or something like that. And if you have people leaving your job talk before you finished or before you've answered questions, that's not going to leave a good flavor in everybody's mouths afterwards. So I highly recommend that you aim it for 45 to 50 minutes to allow time for questions. Okay, your presentation should have the first 10 slides are critical. Then you just say what you will cover and why is it important. And this should be aimed at a general audience. Any citizen should understand your first 5 to 10 slides. Then you give background slides, which again is very general. 10 slides or so on the background, what has been done before, and launching what you're going to do. Okay, so you need to present the background of the field, and this needs to be aimed at everybody present, and even like your parents would understand it. So the whole room, and broader than that, needs to make it very, very clear. This part of the talk is very critical, because if you don't engage people in the first 5 to 10 minutes of a talk, you're going to lose them for the rest of the time. And I've seen people do a really good job of drawing me in areas that I'm not that aware of, or not that I don't have that much knowledge or even that much interest. They can bring me in and make me really care about it, or the opposite. You can see people go way too high. They lose me in the first 5 to 10 minutes, and my mind is going to be on my classes, on my research. I'm not going to be paying too much attention to the rest of it if I've lost here. And so it's really critical that you aim it right. The next 10 slides will be on your approach. You need to talk about what you've done in terms of your methods, and this should be aimed at people close by to your field, in related fields. Not necessarily everybody. Everybody will understand something, but you need to aim it a little bit higher than the background. Then you need to talk about your results, and again, you aim it at people in your field, and you need to show in this part of the talk that you're a world expert on something. So that's why you aim that a little bit higher. But if you maintain the interest early on, the people who aren't in your area are going to follow your approach and your results. They're just maybe not going to get everything. But then bring it back again in your interpretation and summary. 5 to 10 slides aimed at everybody in the room. You need to bring your results back and interpret them in terms of the big picture that anybody could understand. So this is when you bring everybody back in, last 5 to 10 slides, everybody understands you've done something really significant, and then it's important in terms of the big picture. And then finally, you need to talk about your future research plans, 3 to 5 slides at the end. This is the general job talk. In many institutions, you'll be asked to give another talk, which will be to a specialized group. So if you give a general job talk, if you're a seismologist, you'll be able to aim at a second talk at a graduate seismology audience. That can be a lot more technical. In many places, you'll be asked to give a second presentation. It might be more informal. There might be a lot of Q&A in the middle of the talk. Or else, like we do at Penn State, you'll be asked to give a little bit of a vision statement to the search committee, which is 4 or 5 faculty members who are making the bulk of the decision in terms of the hiring. And that will be a Q&A discussion about what you will do in the future. So there may be more than one presentation, but it's the general talk that is the one that you need to truly excel at. Okay, so in your general talk, I always say, you've got to tell a story. Any good presentation will have a beginning, a middle, and an end, often referred to as the three T's. Tell them what you're going to tell them it, and tell them what you told them. All right, so you need to say, I'm going to talk about subduction zones and how they relate to megathrust earthquakes. Then you need to tell them about subduction zones and how they relate to megathrust earthquakes. And then you need to tell them why what you've done has made a difference in how subduction zones lead to megathrust earthquakes. So tell them 3 times. And it's unbelievable to me, I was saying to the group earlier, that I can remember job talks that were given 30 years ago because they did the 3 T's well. There was a story, and a story is an easy thing for you to tell. It's easy for people to follow, and people are interested in this story. And so you need to make sure that you do this well. And this is a really good way to give a talk. Okay, generally, you need to have really good slides. And I put this one up here because this is a terrible slide. This would be a terrible job talk slide. You need to avoid long sentences. You need 1 topic per slide. You need to have your slides with a large font. You need to have pretty graphics. You need to mix up bulleted lists and animations and general data sets. That the format of your slides is so important. You need to have large graphics. Things don't translate well from an Illustrator file that is submitted for a publication into a PowerPoint slide. You need to increase the graphics, the font sizes of everything, 18 point font minimum, bulleted your highlights. Don't overwhelm your audience with fancy font. Don't have a slide like this, and avoid bulleted lists like this. These are not good ways to maintain interest during a talk. 1 or 2 now and then, but you need to also show the data. You need to tell that story with data and animations and the occasional bulleted list to summarize things. Okay, so the format of your slides is absolutely critical. Think about the presentations that you really enjoyed and learned from, and think about how they presented their work. Like I said earlier, we have some faculty who do a great job with beautiful graphics and beautiful fonts and mixtures of animations and data slides and bulleted list slides, so that you really come away with a great understanding of what they're talking about. All right, so your campus interview is over. You go home, you're exhausted, and you wait for a few days or even a few weeks. And the next thing you'll know is that hopefully the department chair will call you up and say, Mary, we really enjoyed your visit to campus. The faculty met and unanimously decided we would like to hire you as an assistant professor. And that's when the negotiation starts. And I always say that what happens in that initial offer, as soon as that phone call happens, is the power exchanges. When you're the candidate, the department holds the power. They're making the decision. When you're now the recruited faculty member for that position, you generally hold the power because they're trying to recruit you now. Okay, you are generally you generally, you know, you have more control. Okay, I always tell people you have control, but be nice about the negotiation. Make sure it's respectful. Make sure that you don't overplay your hand. A lot of times people can get a kind of a bit aggressive with this, and they're like, I have to have this, that, or the other, and if I don't, the whole world is going to come to an end, and it's going to be absolutely terrible. That won't work. Okay, you need to be kind and nice to them about it, and polite about the negotiation. Um, you're negotiating with the department chair in general, but the dean of the college is the one who generally holds the purse strings. So the department chair is just sort of a conduit to the dean. This is what we have in an offer. We have the nature of the position, the start date. In general, there's a offer letter, which will come in terms of a more informal letter, and then there'll be a formal contract, which will be like a legal document. The contract will lay out the name of the position, the start date, and the timeline in terms of how long that term is for. So you can get hired for a 3-year term, you can get hired for a 6-year term, and make sure you understand that. Okay, it's a very important legal document. It's what gives you the position, and I'll talk a little bit about the tenure clock. Okay, the contract will have your salary, but most of the rest of the agreement is in this offer letter, and that will come from the department chair. The contract comes from the university, and the contract, the offer letter will include the salary. It will describe your teaching load, your startup, which is your budget for equipment, your space, and it will differ by the type of institution. For example, you go to a community college, it will talk about your salary and your teaching load, but you generally won't get a startup package at a community college. Whereas if you're at an R1 school, all of these things will be in your offer letter. Okay, so make sure you understand the terms of the contract. This is a legal document. Make sure you understand how long your term is and what it takes to be renewed. So for example, in some universities, you get like a 3-year term. And after 3 years, you need to be evaluated for another 3-year term before you go up for tenure. In the US, tenure is generally after 6 years. Okay? So you get evaluated for tenure during your 6th year at that university. So make sure you understand whether it's a 3-year term or a 6-year term and what that means. Make sure you read the fine print. If you don't understand something, make sure you ask questions. Your tenure timeline must be in writing in the contract and in the offer. Okay, so the offer letter will include your salary. And I always say to people, negotiating salary can be tricky because many of our departments have what we call compression issues. And what I mean by compression is our salaries have gone up fairly rapidly. So as we've gone up to higher salaries rapidly, faculty who were hired 10 to 15 years ago have not increased as rapidly. So what happens is we have faculty who were hired 10 years ago who have salaries that are only just above the level that we're bringing new faculty in. And so what this means is that the department chair really can't go much higher. If they're offering you, say, $40,000, and that's not what we're offering now, and we have faculty who've been there 10 years who are making $45,000, they can't go much higher. So the department chair is generally pretty constrained by what they can offer you. So you need to understand pretty quickly in the salary negotiation whether the chair is doing all that he or she can, okay? And you can only negotiate so far. You have to ultimately have some faith that they're doing the right thing in terms of salary. And in my university, we have a very, very structured salary lines, and we have to be very careful. We don't mix that up because what faculty can do is they can find out salaries from writing grants together. And in some universities, the salaries are online, and it's easy to find out what everybody's making. And this is a way to make everybody very unhappy if we have new professors that are making more than more senior professors. So I say only negotiate so far. You have to ultimately have to have some faith and invest more of your energy in terms of your startup and space, because those are the things that make you effective and successful, and those are the things that ultimately will give you good salary raises in the future. Okay, so next I want to talk about teaching load. The offer will have the norm load for new faculty. So in my university, we have 2+1, meaning 2 courses 1 year, 1 course the second year. At other universities, it's going to be 1+1. Some schools will be 2+2, all the way up to maybe 3+3. Okay, so you need to know what the teaching load is. I would ask for a reduction in the first year as you get your classes and your teaching program started up. So at Penn State, we'll offer a 1+1 load in the first year, and we'll also offer everybody a semester off teaching a year before tenure. So at the beginning of your 5th year, you'll get a semester off so you can get those publications submitted before your tenure file goes in. Okay, so I would ask about a course reduction a year or so before tenure. Okay, the critical part of the offer is the startup. Okay, this is critical because this is what makes you successful. And so you can include in your startup equipment. You can include RAs, which are research assistants, graduate students, or postdocs. You also can include summer salary and travel. So most of our academic positions are 9-month salaries with basically 36-week salaries. And faculty can earn up to 48 weeks worth of salary based on contracts and grants. But that's not going to be possible in your first year or two because you haven't submitted those contracts and grants. So you can include summer salary in your startup agreement. Okay, and I would advise you to do so. Startup is generally a multi-year deal, so you can include summer salary and research equipment over the first couple of years. It's a good way of spreading out the research equipment requests. So you could have a little bit year 1, a little bit year 2, a little bit year 3, which would help the department make you a really good offer. Okay, you need to find out what the norm offer for a startup is when you interview. There's no point asking for $1 million if generally the department can't afford more than $100,000, and the amount will differ depending on the type of university. At an R1 school, you can expect a startup of several hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, whereas in a PUI or a community college, you might at that university get $10,000 or $15,000 to buy some computers, and that's going to be it. So you need to have quotes and bids for large equipment items. So if you're buying a large microscope, or if you're buying a mass spectrometer or something like that, you need to have exact quotes for that, so you can give them that so they know exactly what they need to buy. Don't be vague here. You need to have exact details so that you get what you need. Not for things like glassware or sieves or something like that, but for larger items, you need to know exactly what it's going to cost. Startup isn't something that should be part of a decision, but it often is. So, for example, faculty shouldn't be asking you too many questions about that when you visit, because you don't want faculty to be thinking, oh my gosh, John is going to cost us $2 million, and if we spend $2 million in startup for this position, we'll never hire someone in geomicrobiology for the next position. So you need to be a little bit careful if you get asked too much, but you still need to be aware that you will be asked questions about your startup. And you also need to be aware of equipment that's on campus. So if there's a scanning electron microscope across campus, it might be a good idea just for you to use that microscope and not to buy your own, okay? But my advice is startup is really important because it has a large impact on your own productivity, your students' productivity, so don't sell yourself cheap in terms of startup, okay? And then the other thing that goes in your offer letter is the space. It's really important that you be given adequate space that's close to your colleagues and in pretty decent shape. So you don't want to be in a basement if you don't have to be in a basement. You don't want to be across campus, and you don't want to have a room with poor ventilation or poor air handling and climate control if you need those things. And so it's really important that you get this in writing, and I would make sure that you get that, you have that. And you can negotiate for space really hard. You're a junior faculty member, you need to stand up and say, I need to have X number of square feet for lab, X number of square feet for student operations or students, desks and stuff like that. And this is really important because in the US department, you sort of control your own space. Okay, so other tips about negotiating. Be patient about it. It can take some time. You're going to go back and forth for weeks on a negotiation. It doesn't have to happen overnight. Don't let them push you to make that happen overnight. And I generally recommend that if possible, you can ask for a trip back to campus to look at the department, to look at the real estate, negotiate in person. If you have a partner or family, you can bring them and bring them back and see what they think about living in that situation. It's a big decision, so you need to take it slowly and make sure you have all of the data in front of you before you make that decision. Okay, so my advice overall, having said all that, is at this stage with the pandemic, everybody should be flexible. Okay, my guess is the next year is going to be tough, and if you're looking for a position now, I would be flexible in terms of the type of institution you're looking at and the location. You know, I have students who are like, I have to be in New England. I won't go outside of New York and Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and I have to be there. Well, that's going to be difficult at this time because there aren't that many people hiring. And other people, I have to be at an R1 school, but many of the times I started at a PUI and I've ended up at an R1. You don't always stay where you start, and often you find out where you start. Maybe you didn't think you liked it that much, but you really love it. And so I really recommend you that at this time you be really flexible. And there are opportunities besides like full-time tenure track faculty positions in the US. We do a lot of hiring of replacement folks or sabbatical folks. When somebody goes away on the sabbatical for a year, we will hire a replacement for that person. These sorts of positions really give you great teaching experience, and I think it's a very good opportunity for you if you have the opportunity to go to one of these places and teach classes for a year, because that will make you a much stronger candidate for the position of your dreams when it comes available. What I always tell people is don't get discouraged, because in general you've got to remember there are a lot of people applying for these positions. 3 or 4 people come into campus for an interview, and only one person is going to get selected for that position. So you have to be positive and understand that it's not always like how well you've done and how well you've presented yourself and how much you've done and how much vision you have. Those are really important, but often the decision comes down to how well you fit within the program, which can be a lot more subjective. So are we looking for somebody in this exact area? How does that fit with what we have in other areas? Those are the sorts of things that can go along and that can go into a decision. So I would recommend that if you apply for several positions or as many as you think you can at this time, you'll be much more likely to be successful than if you just say, I need to be, in this university in this state, and that is going to be it, because that's going to be really difficult at this time. Okay. Could you explain what summer salary is? Okay, summer salary is, like I said, we have, in the US, we have 36-week appointments. So that's basically 9 months. And the salary will be divided over the 48-week period in most universities. My first university in Florida, I got 36-week salary, and I didn't get any salary in the summer at all. So my salary stopped in May after I was done teaching. But that was because it was divided in 9. In most cases, they'll take the 36-week salary and divide it in 12. So you get a salary every month. But you can raise the additional 12 weeks. You can't go above 48 weeks. We assume that everybody takes the last 4 weeks in vacation, which is another piece of advice in the US. People think, oh, we're going to the US, we don't get any vacation. I don't advise that at all. I recommend everybody take 3 or 4 weeks of vacation a year, because otherwise you're not going to be effective. The 12 weeks you raise is generally from contracts and grants from the National Science Foundation or NASA or the Petroleum Research Foundation, American Chemical Society, those sorts of places. So you'll raise those 12 weeks from those sorts of places. It's going to be hard for you to do that when you just start as a junior faculty member. So I recommend that you negotiate for some summer salary in your first couple of years, 2 to 3 months, or 8 to 12 weeks. All right, does that make sense? I'm going to look at other questions. Okay, is the starting date of, oh, that is a really, really good question. Okay, is the starting date of a job offer negotiable? How long can the department wait? All right, this one depends on the type of institution. So in a large institution like Penn State, we've waited for a long time for people to come. I think we've waited like 2.5 years for someone to come. So they interviewed when they just graduated from graduate school. and they had 2 postdocs lined up, and they wanted to do these postdocs, so they wanted to get those publications out. They wanted to be able to write their grants and stuff. So we waited 2.5 years. A small department, a PUI or liberal arts program, they're not going to wait for you for that long. They might wait 6 months, but that job vacancy is open when they advertise for it, or somebody's retiring, and they need people to teach those classes, and so they will not wait. So in a large program, we will wait. I think 2.5 years was a little much. I would not recommend more than a year or so. Some departments are happy to wait a year. So if you're a new postdoc, we'll look at you saying, well, that's great that he or she wants to do another year's worth of postdoc, because we'll save the salary for a year, and that person will get out, get the publications going, and write some grants while they're out. So they'll be able to come in and be more effective in their first semester. So we don't mind people waiting a year. I wouldn't recommend that you try to wait more than that, because people are excited when they hire you. They're really excited for you to come to campus. And if you wait, they're going to think, oh, we're just so sorry that Anne isn't coming to campus because we really want her as our colleague, and she's waiting 2 years. That's a long time to wait. Okay. Let's see. I think those are the main questions. Are there any others? Nick, do you see any other questions that I haven't hit?
There are more. There is this question from Georgia Camperio.
Oh.
Just below there.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just saw the thank you, and I just okay. I have 2 questions. Okay, these are good questions. I was wondering about teaching. At what academic stage does a teaching statement become relevant in the U.S., and how can I get that experience? Okay, so I think the main thing is a lot of people applying for jobs don't have a lot of experience. If you're a graduate student, you may not have had a lot of teaching experience, especially if you've done like a NERC fellowship in the UK. I think there you just need to, I would be honest that you haven't had the opportunity to teach, but you have the desire to teach. Okay, in the US, most of our students have had just a little bit of teaching experience as TAs, where they teach a lab section of a class. So if you haven't had that, just say I haven't had experience teaching, but what I've learned from my effective teachers is this. I've been in classes where the teachers have been fantastic, and this is what I learned from that person, and I will emulate that when I teach. Does that make sense? So my advice is don't worry if you haven't had any teaching experience. That's not going to count. That's not going to matter that much. But what matters a lot more is that you demonstrate a desire to teach and that you understand what it is to be effective as a teacher. And you can have learned that from somebody who's really good in the past. Like I learned from John Smith, who taught me seismology, that active learning is incredibly impactful in teaching. And I will emulate John when I teach at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay, how relevant is age in the U.S. for academic position? Okay, well, strictly speaking, we're not allowed to discriminate on age at all. Okay, so there shouldn't be a factor. If you get asked questions like that in an interview, the same sorts of questions that you can imagine that don't come up now, but they sure used to when I was younger. It's be like people would ask about age, they would ask if you're married, they would ask your religion, they would ask sexual orientation. These sorts of questions are absolutely strictly forbidden now. Okay, and my advice is if you get asked any of those sorts of questions, you need to let somebody know that you've been asked those questions, because those sorts of things lead to discrimination. All right. And so, for example, the married question is quite often in geosciences interviews, because quite often our candidates have a significant other, a partner, who is often in a related field, and geoscience is a related field. And we have to be very careful that that information is not used in decisions. Okay, and so if somebody asks you a question like that, you just say, I'm not comfortable answering that question if it's something you're not comfortable with. Okay. And so age is one of those. Your age is not on the application. People can generally figure out your age from your the year of your undergraduate degree. And I'll be honest, age is not an issue with us. All right, it should not be an issue, and it's not an issue. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, you can't be too young, you can't be too old for a position. We're looking for the best person. Okay. Okay. Let me just go through these again. Okay, can the starting date be delayed? Um, okay, good. I didn't. I just see one line of these, and I just thought I just see these. Okay. Thank you, Tim, for the presentation. Universities that have an open-ended call for a position, is this motivation that they're just waiting for a very specific type of candidate? Okay, good question. All right. Um, Open-ended means we'll say the closing date is August 1st, but we will keep the job open until a suitable candidate is found. And that is because in our state system, we have to give a duration for the search. So if we say the search is 2020, okay, it closes in September 2020, that means we have to apply for that position again after September 2020. So in most cases, we're going to leave it open. And in some cases, you'll see a posting that's on a website, but it's actually been filled. It says open and it's been filled. In some cases, they're just continuing to look. So my advice is if you see something which says open, ask about it. Ask if it's still open. If the closing date was a while ago. So the closing date is really important. Okay. In our case, we will continue to look at occasionally look at applications after the closing date, but we're pretty rigid about the closing date. If our closing date says September 1st, we want your materials by September 1st, because in many cases we're on a pretty strict time schedule to make sure we get the job search in and the people interviewed, because we're competing with other schools for people. So we want to be the first people to make offers. All right. Let's see. Oop. Would you see high school teaching experience? Oh my gosh, yes. As a valid experience to apply for a faculty? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I would view high school teaching experience almost as more important or more significant than college teaching experience, because teaching high school is really hard. And if you do a good job of teaching high school with all of the demands of a high school teacher, especially in the sciences, you're going to be a knockout great college teacher, because you have been able to convey excitement to teenagers, and it's easier to convey that excitement to college students. So absolutely, if you've been a high school teacher and you've had experience, I would absolutely include that experience in your application, and talk about what you've learned from being a high school teacher and how you'll apply that to a faculty position. Definitely, it's a very, very good asset to have. Does good funding record matter in job application? How can we postdocs get a good funding record? Okay, no. All right, so the answer to that is good funding does not matter at all. Okay, publications are what matters. Do not worry about funding. I mean, in most cases, we would not expect a postdoc to have funding. I mean, if you've been successful getting funding, that would be nice, but that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking at those publications. We're looking at your research statement, your potential for the future, the vision that you present in your application. Funding, it would be nice to see some funding, but we realize that we're looking at graduate students, senior graduate students, junior postdocs, senior postdocs, and faculty from other universities. That's a very diverse group of people, and we would not expect postdocs or graduate students to have funding experience. So I would worry a lot more about those publications. Publications is what we're looking for. Okay. Do we have to prepare our own course or take over somebody else's course? That's a really good question. So often you'll see, okay, we're hiring a geomorphologist. We have a yearly geomorphology course that we offer, and we really need someone to teach that course. And Mary Jones taught that course before. That doesn't mean that you're going to need to teach it the same way Mary taught the course. Okay, so you could be like taking over Mary's course, but you can make it your own. Okay, so I would say what we're looking for is somebody to develop all of their own courses, from scratch. Even though you're teaching geomorphology and Mary taught it for many years, you're going to be bringing your new vision to that course. And if she taught it for many years, you might have more technology to teach that course, and you might have ideas as to what sort of areas you'd like to talk about in that course. So my answer to that question is, in general, we're looking for you to teach your own course and make it yours and own it, because I think you'll give a much better course if you own the class than if you're just trying to replicate something that's been done before. I think, again, though, that it can be helpful to get Mary's syllabus so you can use what she's done before, but brand it as your own. So, okay. You have a rule of thumb for how many publications? Good, really good question. And this is how long do you think the likely corona recession? Okay, so 2 questions here. At Penn State, we will look for people with a publication record. In general, I would say almost certainly will not hire somebody, will not interview somebody who has no publications. Okay, now I'm not saying that we would, in general, we're not looking for. It depends on where you are, okay, as to how many we would look for. If you're in graduate school and you have one great publication, let's say a Science Advances or a geology paper or a JGR paper or something really, high profile, or EPSL, one of these great journals, that will get you in the door. Okay, that will get you a good look. Okay. If you're a postdoc, we're going to be looking for more. If you're a junior faculty member, we're going to be looking for more than that. So it depends on where you are, and we're not going to discriminate based on, say, oh, that we have to have 4 publications, because everybody is different. Fields are different. Everybody's different. Papers are all different. So I would say you've got to have a if you're a graduate student, you need a publication to get a look. If you're a postdoc, you're going to need more than that. Okay, maybe 2+. If you're a faculty member, you'll need more than that. Okay, so it depends on your level. Okay, don't not apply because you don't think you have enough publications unless you don't have any. All right, you need a publication to get going at an R1. Now, community college may be different, and a PUI may be a little bit different, but I generally think you need to have a publication to get going. If you're a postdoc and you have 2 to 3 publications, apply. Go everywhere, because that's good enough to get a look. And all you need now is to get a look. So that's that question. You need a publication. To be taken seriously depends on your level. More publications the longer you've been out. Just showing you're productive. But don't worry about oh, I need to write 5 publications so I can apply for a job. I would just get those applications out there, because like I said, there's a lot about fit. You're the right person for the right place. You're a junior postdoc, you've got 3 publications, let's say, you're going to get a good look. All right, so publications, as long as you have 1 or 2, if you're a postdoc, go for it. If you're a junior graduate student or you're a senior graduate student, you have 1 publication, you're in good shape. How long do you think the corona recession hiring freeze? Well, there's no hiring freeze right now. I mean, strictly speaking, everywhere. Okay, and many schools do have a hiring freeze. So our school, if there was an offer made, a verbal offer made, you didn't have an offer letter, then I've heard that dean's approval needed to be given to go with an offer. So we sort of have a hiring freeze. I don't think there's a universal hiring freeze there. So it's tough though. Okay. I think the way I would answer this is we don't know yet. All right. And the way I would answer this is there's so many intangibles. For small schools, like I said before, I think the fall semester will happen face-to-face to some degree, okay? Meaning that maybe they'll bring small groups of students to campus and for part of the semester, social distance them and then send them home. And that's assuming that things don't come back in a big way. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen over the next few weeks and months, okay? For the larger schools, like I said, it's going to be really hard for a big school where there are big lecture rooms with 200 students, and it's going to be hard to test and trace everybody at a big school. It's going to be really hard for a fall semester to happen. I would hope that a lot of this depends on how testing and tracing and vaccination goes. I would hope that by this time next year, things are starting to recover in terms of the financial position of universities. It all depends on the type of institution, though, because some universities have a big endowment, for example, and they can rely on those endowment funds to keep going. Some universities don't. Some universities have really good state funding and have been financially conservative, and they can rely on that. In other cases, it is absolutely going to hurt universities if they can't have a full semester, because remember that universities already lost money from spring. They're losing money in summer now because summer schools aren't happening face-to-face, they're happening online. And if a university has to run its program online in the fall semester, they're definitely losing revenue. They're going to be definitely losing revenue. So I really can't answer that question specifically. I would hope that things are starting to recover by this time next year. And especially if we get a vaccination, it's going to be critical for that, because if you can vaccinate the student population, you can bring everybody back and feel safe about it. So it's a worrying thing, but I hope that we'll be moving in the right direction by this time next year. Are teaching mentorship or development courses provided at most institutions? Yes. Okay, that's a really good question. We have a institute for teaching, the Schreier Institute and at Penn State, and new faculty can go there to help develop classes and class resources and activities. And it's a very underutilized resource. There's some faculty, I've counseled everybody to go and get help when they start, and some people do, but some people don't. I think it's very useful. They'll come and they'll tape you, record you. They'll come and sit in your lectures and give you advice. But absolutely, most universities, almost all universities, have resources to help new faculty get started. And the other thing you can use is you can get advice from other faculty members. In most cases, departments will evaluate your teaching every year. So we have somebody sit in your classes every year and give you an evaluation. Very constructive, positive steps. So they'll sit in your classes, they'll evaluate your teaching and help you improve. All right. And so then the last question I see, is it appropriate to mention outreach? Yes. Great question. I would have this in my application materials. I'd have this in the, I would actually put it in the research statement, okay, or your teaching statement, probably in your research statement, that you've done outreach, because outreach is exceedingly important and increasingly important in what we do now in our geosciences departments. We have an outreach activity to our fifth grade. It's important that we bring in the next generation of scientists. We work hard on it. And we include it in our broader impacts and our funding statements, which is important for funding decisions. And departments are looking for faculty members who are really keen to do outreach, because it's important. It's really important. So I would probably maybe mention it in your job talk. I wouldn't spend too much time on it, but I'd certainly mention it in your application materials, your cover letter maybe, and your research statement. So yes, good question.
You mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that the different types of universities in the US have looked for different things in job applications. Does this, in the end, comes down to differences in emphasis on the teaching statement versus the research statement?
Yeah, so a liberal arts school, for example, where, like I said, everywhere expects you to do a great job at teaching, but a liberal arts school will be particularly selective about teaching. And so that teaching statement at a liberal arts school has just got to really be superlative, okay? Whereas at a community college, maybe not quite so much. In a research institution, R1, maybe not quite so much. In the research one institution, we're going to be looking really closely at the research statement, okay? The teaching statement will count for quite a bit, but the research statement has got to be superlative where we are. So yes, it will vary. In the PUI, the undergraduate institution, the bar, the expectations in terms of research are not nearly as high. So in those sorts of schools, you could get tenure if you have a couple publications in the 6 years. Whereas at a research institution, you're expected to have, one or more publications every year. So the expectations change as do the application, what we're looking for in the application in the different schools. Any questions? Hope I hadn't completely floored everybody. I think the people this morning, there were several people this morning who asked about, COVID-19 and how that was going to impact. And like I said, it's really at this stage really hard to know because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 months. But my gut feeling is the big schools are going to have a really hard time running face-to-face operations this fall with the large numbers of students, the large lecture rooms, the sports facilities, the cafeterias where there are lots of people, and the social distancing will be just really difficult. Whereas a smaller school will probably have an easier time. It's more likely that smaller schools will have on-campus activities this fall. But again, really don't know till we know what's happening more in terms of the curve and testing, tracing, hopefully trying to do.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, if anybody wants to, I'd be happy to answer questions by email.
Yes, we will share your email and YouTube. You just showed it in your presentation.
Yep.
Okay, let's see if this works then, because there's not so many questions, so maybe some people can actually.
Awesome. Yeah, you can open those mics if people want to actually ask questions. Julian. I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, this is Orijit. I'm joining from Austria actually, and I thank you for a very good, a very instructive and lucid presentation.
You're welcome.
My question is, you mentioned that we need to demonstrate that we are a world expert in our field. I wonder how realistic is it to demonstrate that for an assistant professor position? Like, what is the assumption here? I mean, how many years out we are from finishing our PhD?
Well, world expert in the field, I would say at the assistant level position, you'll be the world expert in your thesis area, right? Does that make sense? Not in your field. Nobody's expecting. Maybe I said that wrong. I apologize if I gave that impression. But if you're working on, Cretaceous oceanic anoxic events in the U.S. Western Interior Basin, I would expect you to be the world expert in that precise area, not to be the world expert on Cretaceous climate, for example, because that would be very, very, very unfair for us to expect you to be that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry if I gave you that impression. No, that is not what we're not expecting that. In general, what we expect you to be is the world expert in your thesis area. At the tenure level, we want you to be nationally known in your area, not the world expert, but what we call nationally known. So people in the country know, oh, I know, Tim Braylowery works on mass extinction. I know about him. Okay. Whereas when we're promoted to the full professor level, we expect you to be internationally known in that area. In none of those decisions would we expect you to be the expert, because by the expert we mean like the only one, and that would be totally unreasonable. All right, sorry about that. Good question.
Let's see.
Here's a question. Peter?
Trial.
Hello?
Who's speaking now?
Can you hear me? Trial. Hello?
Hello. Who is this?
This is Peter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Trial.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, the microphone is off. Okay. Hi, this is Peter, calling in from New York. Thanks again for the presentation. I also really enjoyed it. So my question was about the diversity statement. I was wondering, when you're writing that up, is it appropriate to share personal background or experiences in that case, or should it be written more for like generally how you would approach it with your students and with people?
I think if you have personal personal stories about diversity, absolutely share them. I actually taught this class in North Carolina this semester to a group of students, and every one of them had a diversity story to tell, like first generation college, which is definitely a diversity thing. You know, they all had something that they talked about that hindered their their access to education, for example, and that was, I think, very important to share in there. So I would make it, I would recommend you make it personal. Absolutely, I think that would be very effective.
Okay, thank you.
It's a tough one. Being honest with you, it's a really tough one to write. So you want to look at those examples. You don't want to sort of overdo it by saying, you know, you're going to be tremendously successful in recruiting a diverse student group into your lab, because it's very challenging right now in the geosciences. But we make incremental progress.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure. Good luck. Yep.
So Tim, there are actually some questions on the right side. Are they visible now for you as well?
Nope. Maybe I should do something here. Let's see.
There are two views. There's a participant view and the presenter view.
Okay, 1 minute.
In the presenter view,
presenter view. Okay.
several
Okay, I
questions.
got him. Okay, are these ones that these are at the bottom? Okay, because they're still showing the ones from earlier.
Exactly.
Can you give me the name of somebody who's where's the first question?
Well, Arjit and Peter,
Okay.
I think have just did the question. So Julian would be next.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you need to be recommended. We're a world expert. Got that. Thank you. Peter's question was diversity. Are there requirements for applying as a foreigner? Julian's question. No. I mean, I think the one thing that I'd be sort of direct about. I do think that you need to show that you can write decently. Okay, and I'm not sure that we would expect. We wouldn't expect a student coming from abroad to write as well as we would expect a US or a UK or Canadian or Australian, a non-English native speaker. But I think you need to show that you do write well. And so if English isn't your first language, I would highly recommend that you have quite a bit of help with your materials. Okay, but otherwise, there are no extra requirements. And if we want to hire somebody in the US, it's become, just being honest with you, it's become a little more challenging in the Trump administration with the visas. But we can do it. Okay, so we can hire people if we decide that our number one candidate is from another country. We will get them a visa. So that is possible. So don't not apply to the U.S. Because of this issue. All right, that's a good question there. Okay, how much time does it take to get your first tenure track position? Okay, this varies. I mean, I tell people you should start applying for jobs when you have 1 or 2 publications. I think that's the sort of the benchmark. I would not start applying to jobs until you have a couple publications, 1 publication at least, 2 starts, and it's all a matter of fit and being in the right place at the right time. And if you start applying, you might get that position quickly if you're lucky. And if you aren't, it might take a little bit longer. So it helps to start applying and applying for a bunch of different positions. And you get practice at it. Your materials will get better as you apply for more jobs. And once you start getting to the mini interview or the Skype interview, you'll get practice at that. And if you don't get to the campus interview, you'll do better the next time you have a Skype interview. And once you get to the campus interview, you'll get better at that, even if you don't land the job. So I did maybe 3 or 4 campus interviews before I got my first job offer. So it took me a while, and I expect we'll take people today. It won't happen overnight, but you just got to be patient. You've got to be positive, and you've got to keep trying. So start early and apply broadly. to places you think you're qualified to apply, and something will happen. All right. So regarding the research resume, what are the expectations in terms of publications, track record, and past grants? Okay, let me just say, for a faculty position, more or less, especially out of a PhD. Okay, out of a PhD, like I said, I would expect a graduate student to have at least one publication. 2 will be better if you're coming out of a PhD. What happens as you go through the next few years is postdoc. You'll need to keep publishing, obviously. So we're going to be looking for a graduate student to have 1 or 2 pubs. Well, let's expect that postdoc to have 3 or 4 publications. If you're a junior faculty member, we'll expect you to have 4 or 5 publications. Those aren't exact numbers, but just make sure that you keep publishing. I can't say this loud enough. Publication is the critical part of a decision. We need to see solid publications, publications in good journals. They don't all need to be Nature or Science papers, okay? Maybe one of them, if one of them is, that's great, but don't feel like you need to publish every single paper in Nature, Geoscience. That is really hard, and you want to be mixing your publications up. So there's some great journals like JGR, EPSL, Geological Society of America Bulletin, Geochemica, lots of great journals that are very high quality. So mix them up. Don't feel like you have to aim all your publications at Nature and Science. It's going to be really difficult to do that today, and I think it'll be very frustrating. So just make sure that you keep those publications going, especially today when we have the slow down for a little bit. Use the time that you have over the next year to put those publications together and get them going, because ultimately that's what's going to get your foot in the door at the publications. That's a critical piece for all of those institutions. Maybe not quite so much for the community college, but for the other institutions, publications are going to make a big difference. So keep going with those. Are there extra requirements for a foreigner? No. Okay, there are no extra requirements at all, and I don't know that there's a statement which says we cannot discriminate based on where you're coming from. Okay, I mean, I'm not sure if there's a law about that protects you as a foreign applicant, but departments don't discriminate based on where you're coming from. So don't feel like you can't apply in the U.S. because U.S. candidates are going to come first. That is generally not the way it works. In my department, we've hired people from all over the world recently. We've had a lot of people from Europe. We've hired people from mainland China. We've done a bunch of different international hiring recently. So don't feel like you can't apply for a position in the U.S. Absolutely go for it. I would say in today's world, you should conduct an international search. I tell my graduate students, apply internationally, because that's what it's going to take today. Any other questions? Okay. I think that's everything.
There's a question by Tamara. Did you see it? Do you see it?
Okay. Oh, yeah. It's come down. Okay, yeah. Okay. I have a technical question. You mentioned CVs and publication records. Based on your experience, how long should the CV be? Good question. I think a CV can be quite long. I mean, like I say, I wouldn't include abstracts. If you have publications, I wouldn't include abstracts. You might do recent abstracts, like the last 2 or 3 years. Like if you've been to AGU the last 2 or 3 years, you could throw those abstracts in there. But people aren't going to be looking at abstracts in nearly as much detail as they'll be looking at publications. Papers in preparation will depend on where you are. I generally think it's a good idea to have papers that are submitted, but probably not papers in preparation unless you're a graduate student. If you're still a graduate student, then I want to see the papers in preparation. If you're a postdoc or beyond, I don't think you should be putting papers in preparation. That's my own feeling. Okay, if you feel like you've got an important paper that's in preparation, include it. It's up to you, but I personally think that's not going to be looked at so serious or taken as significantly if you're a postdoc. If you're a graduate student, sure. All right. Okay. Do I know how the application and assessment procedure is different in Europe, no. Okay, I do know that I know about the British interview system where they bring everybody in for short presentations in front of a panel. Everybody gets asked the same questions. It's not a campus visit. It's very strict and formal. And I think that runs more that way in other European countries, but I really am not an expert on that at all. Nick, you might know better than me.
I don't know
You
yet.
know that question?
I'm still a PhD.
I feel like maybe you should get somebody to come and talk about the European job application system because in the U.S. I know it's very different, and I have no understanding of what it's like in the other countries. So I don't want to jump in there and say something wrong. Okay, should you include in the CV something like hobbies or something important different from science? Probably not hobbies. Okay, I know in the UK because I grew up there that people would put hobbies in their CV. I don't think we need that. I don't think we require that in the US. But what we would be looking for are languages. Okay, so if you have a bunch of different languages, that's going to be looked at very positively. So languages, outreach experience, any experience, any jobs that are a little bit different that might be related, like you've done Outward Bound or something, you've taken people hiking or something like that. That would be looked at as kind of cool in a job application, but only things that would be relevant. So you wouldn't want to say I worked in a department store selling shoes, for example. Okay, that's not going to, people aren't going to worry about that. Probably not hobbies, but things that you think would look good, like languages, definitely look good. Where to look for academic jobs in the US? Okay, good idea, good question. Okay, so EOS is a really good place to start, and AGU's website, they list a lot of jobs. The other place to look would be GSA, Geological Society of America, has job listings. The other place would be American AWG, American Association of Women Geoscientists lists. We would advertise with them. So the AWG website. Sometimes you'll see them in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Those would be generally higher level positions, administrative positions. Some people occasionally advertise in Science and Nature, but that's expensive. So the main places for listings of jobs in the US would be EOS and GSA, GSA's website, GSA Today. Okay. Any other questions? I think that's most of them, right?
This might be it. Nice addition to the questions you had earlier today.
Yeah, those are great questions. So yeah, just really do your research. There's a lot of resources today out there on the internet for job applications. There's a website called Today's Professor that's run out of Stanford. A guy, Robert Reich, I think his name is, Richard Reich or something. And it's out of Stanford. It's called Today's Professor, and he has a lot of resources on there. Make sure that you have a lot of people read your materials. Okay. Start them early, don't throw them together at the last minute, and read them over and over and over to get them just right, and then fine tune them for the university that you're applying to. You can't have the same research and teaching statement for every school. You should probably adapt it a little bit to that department. So it takes a lot of time, but you want to do it right.